Alright, in this video I'm going to walk through the steps of writing your own homework questions and coding those up. So first step is go into your course, any of your courses, and open up your course page. From here, you'll want to go in and add an assessment. So if you just go to add an item, click add assessment, it'll create a new assessment. So for this I'm just going to put some default values in. You can change these accordingly. Alright, so now that the assessment is created, you'll notice that there's really two parts of this screen. And this is the add remove questions screen. So there's questions in the assessment. So these are all the questions that you actually have in this assessment. Right now there's no questions because I haven't added any. And then you have potential questions. And these are the questions that are sitting in the libraries that you're currently viewing. So if you want to add new questions to a certain library, one way to do this is to hit the select libraries, go to whatever library you want to put the questions in. So I'm just going to take, maybe I'll go KSU Pathways and Module 1, and then hit the Use Libraries button. Once you've done that, hit the Search button, and what it will do is open up the library, this Module 1 library. There's no questions in here, nobody's put any questions in here, so right now it's empty. To add a question to this library, you can hit this Add New Question button. So when you do this, it's going to pull up a screen titled Add Question, Set Question. So this is really the question creation page. This is where we're going to create a question, and everything that we need is going to go into this guy. So first piece, there's a description. This is really the label that is displayed when you're looking through libraries. It's really kind of like the title of the question. So you want to make this somewhat descriptive so you know what you're looking at. So for example, I'm just going to say trial calculated number. And you'll notice that you can also put like math text in here with the left apostrophe, just like you would do in the forums. So if you left apostrophe and then just something like delta x equals 5, and then another left apostrophe. And then when you go to your questions in the assessment window, it'll actually display as the mathematics. Alright, so next piece, there's a use rights. By default, it sets to private. This means that only you can access the question, only you can view it and use it. Usually this isn't the case, so you're going to want to change this to almost always you're going to want to use allow use by all. So change that guy. There's a license, and so by default it goes to IMathAS, WAMAP, my open math community. This is, I don't think this ever really gets used, but if for whatever reason you wanted to, say, copyright the question and make sure people know that you wrote it, just go to copyright. You can add additional attribution, and then you can put something like written by Grant Sander, or whatever you want to put in there. Alright, and then there's another piece, My Library Assignments. Right now it says Module 1 because this is the library we're going to put it in. If you wanted to put it in multiple libraries, you could go to the select library, select all the libraries you want to put it in, and then re-update it, and it'll tell you what libraries it's going into. Next, there's a question type. So MathAS, there's a handful of different question types. So if you click on this drop-down menu, it'll pull up a menu of all the different question types. So there's calculated number, multiple choice, all these different question types that MathAS allows. And at the very bottom there's a multi-part, and this allows you to use multiple different question types in one question. So I'm going to do something simple, and I'm just going to do the calculated number type to show kind of the general process of creating these questions. So I'm going to select this, and this means that the only answer entry is going to be one answer box which accepts a calculated number. So by default, there's two panes right here. You have two input boxes. One says common control and one says question text. So common control is really like the back end of the question. It's what's going on behind the scene. This is where you define variables. You tell IMathAS what you want the answer of the question to be. Maybe if you want to create randomized variables or do some calculations, you can do that in this window. Question text is really kind of the front end. It's what's displayed to the student. So you'll notice there's a rich text editor right here. So you can, do things like align your text, bold your text, various other things like this. If you hit the toggle editor button, it'll switch it over and turn everything into HTML. So if you know HTML and you want to do some HTML or CSS type stuff, you can actually toggle this and just do straight up code. But for most people, I think the rich text editor is how you'll probably write things. So there's a lot of interplay between these two things. So what I'm going to do is just start to type the question. So maybe I'll say something like, suppose the value of, and I want to say x, but I don't want it to be just regular x. I want it to be like the math face x. So if you do the left apostrophe again, it'll pull up this red box with the two left apostrophes, and you can just type in x and then tab out of there or arrow out, and it'll put the x rendered in the really like LaTeX rendering in there. Suppose the value of x changes from x naught, maybe I'll go xi equals 2 to xf equals 7. What is the corresponding change in the value of x? Now I'm just going to return a line, and I'll say delta x equals. Now what I want to do is put an answer box right there so that the student enters their answer right after that delta x equals. So I'm going to do $, and then I'm going to type in answer box. So the word answer, the word box. So this $, indicates that this right here, this piece that I have highlighted, is referring to a variable. So this is actually, it's referencing one of the back-end variables. So something that's going on in your back-end code. So what it's going to do is read that and say, all right, I'm going to put it in the answer box right here. Now if you hit save and test question, it's going to save the question and it's going to pull up a preview window. So this is what the student will see if they open the question up, and you'll notice that it looks basically what we want it to look like. But there's no answer. We haven't defined an answer yet. So to define an answer, you go to common control and you do $answer equals, and then you just tell it what you want the answer to be. So right now the answer should be 7 minus 2, so you can actually just type in a computation 7 minus 2. And then if you go to save and test the question, you'll notice that if you typed in 7 minus 2 and submitted it, it would tell you it's correct. And you also have the option to show the answer. So it'll show you what the answer is defined to be. So that's a simple way to create a question. I didn't do anything fancy. I just basically wrote out the text. I told IMathAS where I want the answer box to be. I told it what I want the answer to be. So if you save this guy, it'll say question updated, and then you have the option to add the question to the assessment that you have open. Using defaults, you can add it and choose the properties accordingly, or you can just return the assessment and not actually add the question to any of the assessments. So I usually just use this first option. What it's going to do is put this question that we just created into the assessment that we have open. So Now if you hit the preview, it'll pull up the question that we wrote, and everything looks fine. So now what I'm going to do is create another question. Often I use this template button. So what this does is copy the question, and then you can modify it and create a new question. So if you template that, you'll notice that the description is the same thing, but it says copy by whoever you are. So what you can do is just rename the description. So maybe trial, maybe we'll do multi-part. Now you're going to want to change the use rights to allow use by all. Now we just begin the process of writing again. So what I'm going to do is create a multi-part question. So I'm going to choose multi-part. And with multi-part, there's something different going on now. Now you have multiple different answer boxes and you have multiple different answers. To handle this, you use an array of answers, an array of answer boxes. Basically, there's arrays for everything that you do for multi-part. And all of the arrays are 0 indexed, so everything starts with 0, and you'll see what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is go in and just delete everything I had typed out. And what I'm going to do is I'll just create 2 parts, so maybe I'll make a list. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make something up. So which of the following is correct? And what I'm going to do is to put an answer box, now instead of just doing answer box, you actually have to tell it which answer box. So answer box is now an array. You have to tell it you want the first one. And these guys are 0 indexed, so the first answer box is answer box 0. Now, if I want to do another one, I could say something simple like, what is 7 minus 2? And I can put my second answer box just by doing answer box, square bracket 1. Now, what I have to do is, in my common control, I have to tell IMathAS what question types I'm using. So to do that, you use this variable ANSTypes, and then you can do square bracket, and you have to tell it what each answer type is. So our first one, we're going to use multiple choice, and so the keyword for that is choices. For the second one, we'll do calculated, and the keyword for that is calculated. And if you need help with the syntax, I strongly advise this writing questions help button. So if you click on that, it's going to pull up a little window, and it has all kinds of information, basically everything you need to know about writing questions. And I actually advise you guys read this guy really briefly before you start writing questions. So for example, if I need to know how to write multi-part questions, it'll say, all right, what variables do I need in common control? I need ANSTypes, and here are the keywords for the different answer types, and then it'll have a bunch of optional variables. You can tinker with those. So this writing questions help window is very helpful. You'll probably use it all the time while writing questions. I still use it every time I write questions. So what I'm going to do is, first, for multiple choice, there's a variable called choices. And since I need to index everything because I have multiple questions, I do choices, square bracket 0, and I'm just going to type my choices in. So the correct one is going to be this one, and I'll just say not this one for the other one. Now I have to just tell IMathAS what the answer is for the 0th question, which is really the first question. And I want it to be the first answer choice, so I'm going to say 0, because everything is 0 indexed. And for my second question, the answer is going to be 7 minus 2. And when I go to test this question, I have 2 parts. Which of the following is correct? Here are my answer choices. I want that one. What is 7 minus 2? It's probably 5. Now when you hit submit, you have 2 different green boxes according to the different answer choice. Alright, so that's how you use multi-part, and there's a lot of things going on here that I didn't discuss very thoroughly. Go into the writing questions help, look through that and figure out, and it'll tell you basically everything you need to write questions. The only other thing I want to talk about briefly is randomizing variables. So maybe instead of what is 7 minus 2, we wanted to say something like, what is A minus B? Where A and B are really just random numbers. So to do that, you can go into your common control window, and there's a command. So if you do variable A, so $A, equals, there's commands for randomization in the writing questions help. One of them is rand, which will pick a random integer between the lower bound and the upper bound that you give it. So I'll just go between 3 and 12, and for B, I'll just do a random integer between 3 and 12 as well. Now, if you want to reference these variables, either in your common control or in your question text, you just do $A. So for example, the answer is now variable A minus variable B, and I have variable A and variable B defined in the question text. So when I save and test this guy, it's going to put, all right, what is 8 minus 4? That's 4. If I submit that guy, counts it as correct. There's a button down here that says submit and regen. Regen really just means regenerate all random variables. So if I do that, you'll notice that it puts new variables in. So that's how you randomize variables. So I'll just save this guy, add him to my assessment, and there's two very brief questions that probably don't make sense, but that's the general process of creating new questions. Again, and if you want to edit these guys after you've written them, just go to the source tab and hit edit, and it'll pull the window back up and you can start to edit things. Again, this writing question help will be a life save. It makes it very easy. There's also different ways to, I won't go into this, but to add an image, if you wanted to add an image, there's a couple ways to do this. There's a little tree option, and so it'll pull up a insert edit image, and you can either upload a new file here, or you can pick from the files that have already been uploaded. So like, for example, I can throw in this little GIF, and it'll just put the image right into my question. So if you have any questions on this, or if any of this isn't very clear, just send me an email, and I'll try to answer your questions. But once you get the hang of it, it should be pretty easy to start writing questions.